The stimulus money is interesting, and you'll see a lot of people talking about Keynesian economics versus laissez-faire, Adam Smith. How do we economically work to help stimulate the economy? Well, first you could argue that the government's never been good at being able to enter into anything to do with the economy and do a good job. However, I think if you really look at John Maynard Keynes and Keynesian economics, you can say that under certain conditions, there was a small portion of that Keynesian economic stimulus idea that could be valid, and that condition is infrastructure. He said that infrastructure should be invested in times of economic downturn. And how you qualify that is, it isn't infrastructure when infrastructure is good. It's infrastructure when infrastructure is crumbling as it is today, whether it's wastewater infrastructure, rail, roads. We should invest in those in this economic downturn because as a state and as a country, we can set ourselves up when we come out of this to have better ways to get things to market quicker. Airways as well, our local airports. A lot more business has even been done. Schwann's is probably the best example. From Minnesota, Marshall, Minnesota, Schwann's can hit the whole world from an airport in Marshall, Minnesota. And most people aren't aware of that kind of thing. The bad part of the stimulus. If you believe in Keynesian economics, and people keep saying, well, we're going down the Keynesian road, we're not really, because again, Keynes would have said to invest in that infrastructure, and yet less than 20% of that economic stimulus is actually hard assets. So really by hard asset, we're saying when you invest in it, does that asset have enough value there to depreciate over 20 or 30 years as you're paying it back? And less than 20% of this stimulus program actually has that hard asset ability. 80+% of it is one-time money. One-time money to healthcare issues, to welfare programs, to education. And we've got to be really careful. I would argue that we ought not to even accept that because it ties our hands. The stimulus money we get for '09 ties our hands and says the budget you're working on today cannot be changed if you take this money. And we really have to start changing it. We have to start getting to the structure and saying, what is wrong structurally? How can we change this so long term it doesn't balloon itself out of sustainability? Education, the same kind of things. Yes, we want education to be good. Yes, we want to spend where we need to spend it. Again, I'd argue that the federal government getting involved in education has grown the price of education, and yet the results go down. So having said that, if you put more money into it today and there's more mandates, it just costs you more and more. And yet when you accept that, you cannot change the structure of education in order to have a better outcome down the road. So if it was up to me, I'd opt out of No Child Left Behind tomorrow. I'd say we don't want your money. We want our local school districts, our local people deciding how to educate kids. Even at the county level and the state level, we ought to opt out of the stimulus money and say we as a county can run things better. We as a state can run things better, because when we send the money to the federal government and then get it back, it always comes back with a lot of rules on how to use it. And we don't need that because every county is different. Our state's different than every other state in terms of the type of people we have here, the type of even workforce programs and other things included in the stimulus package where the federal government is telling us how to use it. And to use one-time money is totally unsustainable. Even though it arguably doesn't have tails, which means it doesn't include spending way out. In this case, it does because it mandates that we can't change the structure of our program. So these programs, if we accept this money, will keep ballooning and ballooning out of control. And that's the wrong kind of message for the federal government to be sending in a time when we should be rethinking what is the role of local, county, state, and federal government.
Can Minnesota pick and choose which areas of money, which pots of money they accept?
To some degree, Minnesota can, and other states can pick and choose, but the general idea behind the stimulus is if you take part of it, you sign on to all of it. And so you've seen governors such as Bobby Jindal, Louisiana was the first governor, Republican governor, came out strongly, said he doesn't want the money because he doesn't want to tie the hands of his state into these future programs. And he's done a really good job at changing Louisiana, changing the structure. So they're sitting probably better than any other state in the United States today in this economy. But it's not a Republican issue. There's been a number of Democrat governors that have come out and said the same thing. They've said, we can't buy into this program because if you don't allow us to fix the problems in our state, whether we put it off for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, down the road this is unsustainable and our states will come right back to the same position they've been in before.